Hello and welcome to From the Be-All End. This is the debrief for Burnley 1, Blackburn Rovers 1, the East Lancs derby. Ending in a draw, the Clarets taking an early lead with Lau Foster and then an absolute fluke, stroke worldie, depending on which side of the M65 you're on, from Andreas Wyman, who I can't believe he's still about, flicking a leg at a loose ball to put Rovers level. With me, Justin Connolly and Paul Woodhouse to discuss, which is what was probably one of the more competitive East Lancs derbies, I have to say, in recent years. I mean, Rovers made a bit of a fist of it. They were,
we were the same game as me.
Well, just compared to the 3-0 before the last World Cup, where they basically didn't really venture into our half. I thought they were at least, to a certain extent, didn't control the game at any point, didn't create very much. But yeah, so let's start with you, Justin. We were just talking before we started recording. It's one of them weird ones, isn't it? Because we had all of the chaos of last week. We had new lads coming in, and we had kind of two new debutants in Jayden Anthony and Josh Laurent, just in case we need another Josh in midfield. And we had home debuts as well for Worrell and for Hannibal. It was a pretty good performance, albeit with, the caveat of some of these lads had only had one training session and there's probably plenty more to come from them.
Yeah, I mean, the word I've been using to describe it is encouraging. I as I said before we came on air, on paper, a draw at home to a side that's down to 10 men is not a good result, is it? Especially against these. But in the context of the circumstances surrounding the game, I found particularly the first half hour, well, up until they scored, I thought we were fantastic. And I think we played some really aggressive, forward-thinking football, and we should really have put them to bed in that first 20, 25 minutes. So if we can do that, there's 5 new players in that side who's joined us at the start of this season. To be able to, and like you say, some of them maybe only signed like a day or two before that game. To do that, to be able to produce that, and that this distance into working together is impressive, I think. And also, if we can say that that's the worst it's going to get, we must get better the more we work together. I think we're in for a very interesting season.
Yeah, and Woody, I mean, Justin said there, isn't it? If that's the worst we're going to be, kind of echoing Vincent Kompany after we got smashed by Man City. But in all seriousness, it was, encouraging is probably a good description, isn't it? I mean, Rovers were celebrating like they'd won the league, as they often do in August. It extends the unbeaten run against them. I read somewhere that there's now people turning 18 who won't know what it's like to see Rovers beat Burnley. I know we all went through a bit of that kind of, in the previous run. Yeah. But the debutants and the new lads who've come in kind of added a different dimension, didn't it? I mean, lots been made of the players who've left and whether their heart was really in it. And Scott Parker alluded to it. Alan Pace alluded to it. The lads who've come in seem pretty set on the mission, don't they? And what Scott Parker's wanting to do with this Burnley team.
Yeah. Basically, our season started yesterday, didn't it? Yeah. We went from, we've had, if you compare to the Sunderland game, it's like night and day, and also with the playing staff, and we've gone through it, and we'll probably mention it again at some point. But that kind of turmoil that became a relief, So I think the outpouring of relief, but the very fact, like Justin alluded to, that most of them had only just had one training session prior, And that was basically to go through the game plan. And I think the way that we kind of set our stall out, and that, especially that first 25 minutes or so before they scored, as most people would agree, we absolutely hammered them. I've just watched it again, and they were chasing shadows. But we forget about this league, I think, about how different it is to the Premier League. The sort of stuff that you can get away with in the Championship is infinitely different. And to its benefit, I think it makes for a far better, especially for derby days. I just saw that incident with Sheffield United against Watford where somebody got rugby tackled, and it's just like the kind of stuff that you get away with. They would have been down to 10 men. Yeah. That Travis challenge in the first half was infinitely worse than that one of Zarori's against Man City, last year. And you kind of forget. But and considering the fact that we had only had that one training session, how we want to play, and we want runners coming from midfield, but we hadn't been able to work any of that kind of stuff out. Yeah. So we decided to go down the flanks and play percentages with regards to that. I thought that Owen Beck played extremely well for them at left back, because not too many times will you see Koleosho be put in somebody's pocket necessarily, but he seems to be one of those players that struggles a little bit when he has to kind of go around someone as opposed to like either coming in or going off the shoulder or whatever. But I think there were a lot of things to be, happy about. You could tell with the interviews afterwards that Parker was a lot happier. The players seemed to be a lot happier. They knew it was a job done. It wasn't the job that they wanted to get done. But I thought Anthony had a very good debut. I thought we looked good down the left at times. And I think overall it will only get better. And I think, the intensity of some of the play, I thought how we stuck to it. Yeah, it was disappointing when they went down to 10 and we looked pretty toothless, all told. But like we said, that was mostly due to Benson trying to play off memory and his wonky ankles.
Yeah, definitely. We'll perhaps come on to Benson in a couple of minutes, but last season, Justin, we talked a lot about partnerships forming, and they never really formed, did they? At the start of the season, we were kind of hanging on to that kind of hope that, down the left, you might get a fullback winger partnership. But actually, yesterday, Perez and Jadon Anthony, it seemed to, click a little bit, albeit, like we keep saying, one training session, whatever. I thought Anthony looked a little bit overwhelmed at times. But A, what a ball for Foster's header. Yeah. And B, I think he grew into that game. And you can see that there's a real player in him. Yeah. And a player who wants to get past the opposition fullback. So, Hannibal in midfield, Josh Laurent alongside Josh Brownhill. You just think kind of, international break, there's not that many players going away. I know there's a few going away with under 21s. You'd hope that actually by the time we come back and we've got Leeds United, I think it is, isn't it, next fixture after the international break, that some of these partnerships will have really, really developed in training, and these little kind of interplays will have a bit more of an idea of the way Scott Parker wants to play.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right about that, and I think Hannibal's a great addition to that midfield. He gives us that little bit more. He's a bit more mobile, isn't he, than the other two, and he puts himself about a bit. I didn't quite catch. I couldn't quite see what happened with his booking, but I'm sure he absolutely deserved it, considering the way he charged around before that. I thought it was interesting that the partnership between Perez and Anthony on that left hand side. You could almost see it develop during the game. Like early on, there were a few sort of flicks and back heels that didn't come off, and then it started to sort of work a little bit. I thought I was a bit worried about Perez getting so far forward, though. There were times when he was beyond the winger, which but then that's the risk you take, innit? That's the where you've got to be brave sometimes. It didn't quite work like that on the other side, where Roberts is obviously a bit more defensive than. He didn't quite get as far forward, but I thought Koleosho had a good game as well. He showed flashes of what had made us so excited about him. Before he got his injury last season, and it was great to see like positivity. You see wingers so often in that situation that Anthony found himself just before the goal, where they turn around and go backwards and keep the ball. He was, he was determined to get past that guy, and the cross was just it was very actually reminiscent of Zarori's goal runs. Like, the only thing that was missing was the goalkeeper going in the back of the net. But I think that's true. I think the partnerships, there's a lot of promise in that as well. And with the other lad, the other new lad who wasn't registered in time to play, to come into the mix as well. So the situation with the squad rotating like this, it's frustrating. It's really frustrating, because we saw those first 2 games of the season. If we'd gone through an entire season with that squad, we'd have probably walked it. And now there's a bit of uncertainty about it. I suppose it makes it that little bit more interesting. And I was worried before the game. It could have gone either way, couldn't it? It could have all fallen apart. I think it was really important not to lose that game, because that would have been, a real blow to the confidence after the last couple of weeks we had. It might have been difficult to shake off quickly. So encouraging signs. We've got a couple of weeks now. It's almost like it's like what he said. The season started yesterday, but it's almost like pre-season starts now. Because we've got a couple of weeks, haven't we, where we can sort of get a little bit more organised. Hopefully, some of the injured, hopefully Josh Cullen can make his way back, and hopefully Estev's it. I don't know. Has anybody heard anything about the injuries to Estev went off, didn't he? And Benson.
Yeah, I think somebody said on at the Clarets that Benson came out on crutches, but Esteve came out and he was walking all right. So I'm presuming that Esteve may go away with the under-21s, French under-21s. I know Josh Cullen told Phil Bird, who he was doing commentary with, that he wasn't going away with the Republic of Ireland squad, but was hoping to be back for the Leeds game. So a little bit of kind of promising news on Cullen. Woody, I mean, a lot was made of Koleosho being furious that he couldn't get his move to Wolves, and Foster desperately wanting to leave and things like that. Neither player looks like they were sulking, did they? Let's be honest. I mean, Foster, it's a great header, and he you can always tell he looks really relieved when he's got a goal, and he really enjoys that moment. Lots of smiles, lots of running. Slightly frustrating that he took on that Harry Kane role, dropping into midfield looking for the ball. But him and Koleosho, if there was any kind of sulking on, Friday night, seemed to have got it out the system, didn't they? By the time 12:30 came around on Saturday.
Yeah, I think some of that might have been a bit of bullshit.
Yeah.
Because if anything, of all the players out of that side that looked like they wanted to make a point, it seemed to be those two, didn't it? They both ran the socks off. They were both willing, and they both had, pretty solid games all told, and they certainly didn't look like they'd down tools. I think the thing with Foster, especially with the way that we play, is that we require runners to support him, because, like you say, he either drops off or he's dropping off a little bit wider. And there were various occasions where there were ample opportunity for somebody like a Fleming to have occupied the space behind him. So it's going to be quite exciting as we move forwards and we start working out how to play a little bit more like that, how that develops, because it just seemed that at times we were lacking bodies in the box, and we weren't able to play little through balls to anybody, or it was all a little bit tight. But that'll come. I'm extremely confident with that, and I think Koleosho is obviously gonna burn this league up in some which way, shape, or form. So I don't really have any problem at all with those two. I think they adapted to the situation and showed and were pretty much the spearheads of the response that we were looking for after this 2 weeks, as much as anything.
Yeah, it's great to see Koleosho on the name on the team sheet. That's just a
little boost that
weren't everybody
pre-match.
Exactly.
Yeah, because he had been injured as well, hadn't he?
But you're right.
So you're right about Foster. Like he was running, he was trying a bit too hard, I thought.
Yeah.
There were a few times when he picked the ball quite deep and he was turning around and moving forward, and he was the man he should have been passing to.
Yeah.
And then like in the second half, I know we describing them as a bit toothless, but let's be honest. They just sat back and didn't. I wouldn't say they gave up trying to score, because they were trying to play on the break a little bit, weren't they? And that almost came off a couple of times. But the absolute shithousery of that performance from them. I mean, they were all crowing about it, and as you say, like celebrating like they won the leagues. And I was thinking, I'd be if my team had played like that, like falling over every time anyone came anywhere near them, and just sitting back. We are going to have to learn how to play against sides who do that, though, because we're going to come up against that often. How do you draw them out? How do you get through them? But oh god, it was so frustrating that second half to see him just falling over all the time and writhing about on the floor in agony, and they managed to hold out great. I thought we really threw away some decent set piece opportunities towards the end there. We really wasted them, which was weird, because in contrast to that, in Lucas Perez, we finally found somebody who can take a corner and get it in the right spot consistently. But yeah, if we can't pick apart sides who play like that against us, there's going to be some games we're going to really struggle in, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the less said about Josh Brownhill's late free kick deep into injury time, the better. I mean, we had the big build up, and there were a bit of pushing and shoving, and then all of a sudden Brownhill fires inside. You could see how distraught he was, to be fair to him. But yeah, I think that's always the big thing, into the breaking down teams who sit. And somebody again commented on Up the Claret, said it felt a little bit like them early games of kind of the Championship season under Company, where you've got such a big turnover of players that actually you're trying to feel your way into, right, who's going to overlap. There were a couple of times, as you mentioned, I think, where the ball was too long for Perez, or the ball from Laurent second half was just too far in front of Koleosho, and he's quick, but he's not that quick. You just think, once we start getting to the point where you kind of go, right, Josh Laurent hit a couple of balls, overhit a couple of balls, you'll get into that rhythm, won't you, Woody? And them little passes that were 2 yards too hard suddenly become perfect balls, like we were seeing at Luton, like we were seeing at home to Cardiff. All of them balls suddenly just start to click, don't they, after the lads have played together a bit more.
And it's where you miss Cullen. That's where you realise that he's that metronome. And also the other thing that we miss a little bit is that, that the some of the possession that we had at the back, just dinking it between Worrell and Steve, was worthless possession. It just became like a little ball into the channel, as opposed to trying to either find, they hadn't played enough together to be able to like either dink it to Laurent and being able to like turn on it like Cullen might have done and find a player. We weren't able to progress like that, which is how we have played at least for 3 seasons now, isn't it? And so, how the ball progresses from the back to the front is going to be interesting as we move along. Because against sides like Blackburn, who are, like we said, just shithousing, those little longer balls are extremely easy to clear up, aren't they? But I think I don't see a problem with us getting there at all.
Yeah. Let's turn his attention then to the transfer window. I mean, it's been a roller coaster of emotions over the last kind of week or so. I mean, I've had Burnley fans onto me who were kind of, Dom Pace at the start when we'd sold JBG to the Saudis for 600 million or whatever we got for him, just days after re-signing him at Leeds Bradford Airport. And then all of a sudden it was like, Pace is ruining this club, he needs to go. And then all of a sudden he shakes hands with Zian Fleming on a helicopter picture, somebody hiding in the bushes at Gothorpe, and all of a sudden he's got the cigars back out, and the Dom Pace, he's at the helm of HMS Piss the League again. But I mean, the reality is it's somewhere in the middle, isn't it? I mean, I'm still not 100% certain that the end to the transfer window, which I have to say is quite impressive. I mean, getting Fleming is a good signing. I think getting Sarmiento is a good signing. Anthony's proved that he's a good signing. It does feel a little bit by accident than design, or am I being a bit harsh on Mr. Pace and AOK, Justin?
No, I don't think you're being harsh on them at all. I think it's been an absolute shambles. Whether the general consensus seems to be this was not the plan. It's very difficult to tell because obviously you don't get any information whatsoever about what's going on. But I've read quite a few pieces about how it all went down. I still am no clearer on why did this have to happen? Why is it that it's gone from no, what we want to do is keep the bulk of this squad together. We might have to sell the top players, and obviously we did do that. Why has it gone from that was from we're going to sell everybody? Why? I don't understand why this turnover of what was it, 20 players out and 15 in or something like that?
21
36 ins and outs, I think, weren't it? Yeah, 35, 36.
And I think Pace himself acknowledged that, he understands that the fans want a settled squad that can grow and build together. And he wants that too, apparently. So why that begs the question, doesn't it? Obviously. So why have you done this then? And I think you're right that on the face of it, as we sit here after yesterday and, we've played half an hour of decent football, and looking at the names on paper, it seems like the squad's reasonably well balanced. We seem to have most places. There seems to be a lot of potential in some areas and there seems to be a lot of opportunity for things to get better. There's still the obvious holes I think we could have done with another centre forward, really, but I know they're the ones that are most difficult to get a hold of. But it's and then to turn around at the end of the window and say, well, I think we've got away with that. It's an entirely self-inflicted situation that they put themselves in by taking the route that they took, and it makes no sense to me. I don't know. We were remarking only 2 or 3 weeks ago about how happy the squad looked, about how they were having a great time when they were out on the training camp in Spain. For those first 2 games, didn't give any sort of clue as to, there was massive, discontent in the camp. Then all of a sudden, it just a switch flicks. We don't know why, and suddenly everyone's up for sale. So I'm not, it's like. So it was your analogy, wasn't it? You give a box of matches to an arsonist, and then you're surprised that they burn the house down. Well, they don't win any prizes for putting the fire out afterwards if they're the ones who started it.
Yeah, it definitely is, Woody, and I think in terms of where we're at, do you see this as an admission that actually the last summer's business? We saw Dave Checkett's in Mission to Burnley too basically say, actually, we fucked up here. This strategy of buying young players will cost us in the Premier League, and it did do. Laurent's a bit older, Worrell's a bit older. Is this the model now that actually you don't just bring in a load of untested youngsters and hope that you can sell them? I mean, we've got a few loans with obligations to buy. To me, it felt like 2 things. A, clearing out pretty much everybody who had any whiff of Vincent Kompany on them. That seems to be the kind of, part of the strategy. But is it also a kind of admission, not that they will admit it, that actually, you know what, we've been a little bit gung-ho with this player trading strategy, and actually to be successful, A, we need to be in the Premier League, B, we need to survive in the Premier League, and C, you can't do that just by bringing a load of kids who have good ratings on Football Manager. You've got to mix it up with some of them older heads that we were desperately missing last year.
Well, I think definitely C is correct. You suddenly see the players that have been brought in, and you look at that spine yesterday, and you look at this side now, and there's a lot more leadership within that side. You've got Worrell, who's a skipper. Connor Roberts is vocal. You've got Brownhill, who's our skipper. Laurent, who was a skipper. And then you've got Cullen coming in, who was our skipper. Foster's very vocal. And that's a very different spine to a kind of a bunch of young lads who are all looking at each other and they don't know who to turn to. And I know it's completely different in the Premier League, but it's still a baptism of fire in the Championship. There's no saying that a bunch of 19-year-olds are going to find it extremely easy, even though they look like they found it extremely easy for those first 2 games. But I think there's definitely a huge element of that. But we're still going to have to tear, if we do wind up getting promoted, we're going to have to burn the house down again to a greater or lesser degree. And at some point, the insurance is going to start asking questions, aren't they? You know what I mean? And it's you kind of get it, but I'm still not having that anybody thought that this was a plan. It feels like it's this year's, why the bloody hell did we sign Trafford? Why did we go through this? Why did we blow everything up in the way that we did? And we'll find out at some point as to what it genuinely was. But it just seems that just isn't tenable. It's not sustainable long term as either a process or as a way of going about things. And I get it that ALK are new to all this kind of business, and it's and we can say that they probably learned quite a lot from their time with VK and probably got burnt in a lot of respects. And like you said, with regards to Check-Its, that we need some older heads, etc. But you can't keep swinging from one end of the spectrum to the other just to rectify your balls up from the season prior. It's entertaining, don't get me wrong. Following a chopper around on Twitter is as good as it's going to get on there. It's far better than Dale Stevens rocking up. But it worries me. It still worries me a little bit. But it'll be something that we laugh about when we're top of the league come December. And like you say, HMS pissed the league has careered off and missed all its icebergs.
Excellent, yeah. We've not seen Fleming yet, of course, but I mean, he has quite an impressive record. I think it's 20-odd goals in the last 2 seasons for Millwall from an attacking midfield position. He looks like the kind of player who's really going to fit Justin, doesn't he? That kind of, we think we're a bit toothless up front, but actually getting somebody to properly play off Foster, perhaps take up some of the space that he should be in when he drops deep. It's quite exciting. I mean, he is a player who we were tracking. I think he said in his interview that, there was some interest last year. And then again, Thursday, I think he got the call to say we were interested when when we were looking for something to keep the fans happy, I guess. But I mean, he's proven at this level, he's an exciting player. He could be that little bit of that missing link that we've been looking for up top, couldn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very difficult to go off. I mean, it's very difficult to go off just that one game that this sort of new Burnley have played. But he is something a little bit different to what we have there already. And it might be an indication of how Scott Parker wants them to play. And I think we saw yesterday the limitations of what Foster's able to do if he goes a-wandering. So, as Woody says, if you've got somebody who can go beyond him and fill that space and provide an opportunity for him to have somebody to pass to who's further up the pitch than he is, then that's what we need. We need versatility. We were really toothless in the game up at Sunderland. Really, just there was no opportunity for us to break the lines and get beyond them. But yesterday that all changed, and if we've got a further option, a further different way of doing it, that might have been the key that unlocked them yesterday and gave us an opportunity to go on and win that game. Because, like I said, there will be times when we're playing against this low block where they've got the 2 banks of 4 in front of the keeper, and you there's no space to get around them or through them. So yeah, he could be that. But I mean, it's options, isn't it? That's the key to it. Options, different kinds of players. I think Scott Parker's already showed that he's not going to just play one way. He's going to, he does like this idea of setting up the side to beat the team that's in front of him. Yeah. So more options is great, and he's definitely a different kind of player to the ones we've got, and I'm really hopeful he's going to make a big difference.
Yeah. And Woody, of all the departures, which was the one which you were most disappointed with, perhaps in terms of, player you felt was perhaps key to this championship season, or a player who you were excited to see develop in a division below the Premier League?
I think everybody were saddest about Coutinho going, because a lot of us said that we didn't recognise anybody, within this Burnley side as a cast iron claret, and probably out of that side from last year, it probably was Coutinho. And you can't begrudge him going by any stretch. But it just felt, I don't know, that one seemed to have a little bit more of a twinge of angst than anybody else. A lot of the others, you could see that Amdouni would have a field day. Odebear, Berger, they'd all have field days. But I think the replacements, getting the Bermondsey Bergkamp, as the Millwall fans call him, and we can now call him the Burnley Bergkamp, he's some player. And I think we're going to find out how good a player he is and how requisite he will be to this side. And I'm extremely excited about him. And then Hannibal as well. I think we're going to play some ridiculous football at some point this season. And I think overall, we never knew how well some of these lads could play. Yes, we had a sense with the likes of Berger and Odebear, but I think as a side and as a unit, we never really saw them get the opportunity to click. And so in that respect, it's a little bit disappointing. But in another respect, it's a side that you could never really grow to love because you didn't really know about them. Whereas this current crop, all the interviews that you've seen seem head and shoulders above anything that we've seen. Everybody was buying into it. The fact that Fleming didn't just turn up and go through the motions and say the normal old platitudes. He was excited to wear the shirt. He'd spoken to his dad. He just wanted to get on the training pitch and play, and he didn't want to talk to agents. And he didn't want all that bullshit. And the same with, Laurent, Anthony. It was just refreshing to hear that in terms of what we've been listening to prior and what we thought might have been happening. And I really do think that, Fleming, Hannibal, it could be these could be some quite exciting times. So I don't really regret anybody who's gone, to be fair, especially if it's made us a better unit and it's what Scott Parker wants. And I think that'll hold us in far better stead than had we tried to keep hold of a load of lads who really didn't want to be here.
Yeah, and just they do have a bit of a feel of a Scott Parker set of signings, don't they? In terms of, they're perhaps somewhere between Vincent Kompany and Sean Dyche. You've got the kind of tried and tested, perhaps, with which we're used to with Sean Dyche. And then you had that kind of little bit of excitement and a little bit left fieldness with Vincent Kompany. This feels somewhere in the middle, doesn't it? And to me, as the window went on, it felt more like perhaps Scott Parker had said, look, I'm losing a lot of players. You've got to give me a bit of freedom because, I think the model when he came in was, look, we'll give you the players. Your job's just to coach them, get them winning that championship. But it felt as the window went on, Laurent, Fleming feel like perhaps players that Parker's identified as, look, these are the lads who perhaps will get us promoted if you go out and get them for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's the manager, isn't he? He wants to play a certain way. They've given him the job. They've offered him the opportunity to do that. So, yeah, I mean, I think if we'd all had a say on this last season, somewhere between Vincent Kompany and Sean Dyche is probably where we all want to be, isn't it? Yeah. Although I'm not sure that the football that we played under Vincent Kompany was particularly exciting. I'm not sure whether we'd all agree with that, but yeah, I think that's where we want to be. I think we were all a little bit underwhelmed when Parker got the job, if we're all honest about it. But especially given that some of the other names on the list. But as Simon said last week, I think he's been quite impressive the way he's dealt with this. He's not hidden. He didn't hide his disappointment at what was going on in the club. He had his say. He's obviously had some significant influence over the names that have been brought in. And I suppose if there's any credit that you can give to the board and the ownership who got us into that mess in the first place, it's that they have backed him. They have got players in. And as Woody says, they all look like they want to be involved and they all want to be here. So it's amazing, really, how quickly things can turn. They turn very sour very, very quickly. And now we're now sort of cautiously optimistic that things are going to improve. So yeah, if you look at that squad, it seems to have a nice balance to it. It seems to me we have options in different areas. And to go back to the question that you just asked, Woody, the transfers that I'm most disappointed about are more the ones that didn't happen. We're still paying Mike Tresor for doing absolutely nothing. But the ones that did happen, I'm not complaining about any of them. I am actually in some ways more excited now than I was at the start of last season.
Interesting. What a positive note to end on. I was going to whinge about the fact that I couldn't get a pie before the game. At the biggest game of the season, there were no meat and tater pies. But we'll part that negative.
How can that happen? I was there.
I know.
12:15. Have you got any pies? Oh, they're not ready. Same as last season, really. There were like 3 women in the back there sticking the
thermometers
into the pies. And how can you? What, you didn't know this game was happening this afternoon? What? How can you do that? It's just insane, isn't it? I had to have one of them horrendous hot dogs instead because I was starving.
I sent my mate down 10 minutes before. It was his turn for the pie, so he had to go 10 minutes before half time to get them. But part of the problem is then you can't eat them until about the 80th minute because they're like molten lava inside. But we will end on the positive. I agree. I think Scott Parker has been the perfect man that you want at the helm during this crisis. You think about a Ruud van Nistelrooy, you kind of get the impression he'd have walked. You kind of get the impression that some of these fancier managers have just gone, you know what, you've sold me a pup, I'm out of here. Whereas Parker, I think, has, he's held it together and he's been very steadfast in his, look, there's challenges. Somebody asked him, I think Matt Scrafton asked him, has it been a stressful week? And he said, not stressful, but there's been challenges. And he touched on the fact that players, alluded to the fact that players were perhaps had agents in their ears that perhaps weren't giving them the best advice, etc. So, let's end on that positive. That actually having Scott Parker at the helm, I think, is a real positive. And again, a bit like you, Justin, I'll happily admit that I was very underwhelmed once we went from the, star boys of Van Nistelrooy and all of this lot to Scott Parker. But I'm quite excited as well. I think I'm as excited as you are that actually what's going to happen over the next kind of 6-8 months we could be in for a good ride. But we have to wait a couple of weeks until the next Burnley game, of course, international break, perhaps coming at the right time for Burnley in terms of Scott Parker being able to get most of the players together and get them kind of ticking on the training field. We'll be back on Friday with an episode. We've got nothing to preview, but I'm sure we'll either run the rule over the summer in a bit more detail or we'll perhaps look ahead to the next run of fixtures. But we'll be back on Friday. Until then, enjoy the start of the week and up the Clarets.